We're seeing more and more longtime Republicans announcing their plans to vote for Kamala Harris. Last month, it was former Wyoming Congresswoman Liz Cheney who campaigned with Harris last Thursday. And yesterday, it was another conservative stalwart, the former chair of Florida's Republican Party, Al Cardenas. And Al joins us now. He also served in the administrations of both Presidents Reagan and George H.W. Bush.
You know,
it's great to have you on the show.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much for being with us, Al. For those not as familiar with Al's career, just simply saying that he was chairman of Florida GOP
that should be
is an understatement, and I mean that. I mean, Al was the Florida Republican Party for decades, and Al, I remember you giving your life to promoting Republican ideas. I remember, seeing you in Escambia County and Walton County and Santa Rosa, Okaloosa, all the counties, and you were tirelessly working. But now you've made a decision that Dick Cheney, Liz Cheney, Ken Edelman, over 100 people in the Reagan, Bush 41, Bush 43, and even Trump administration have made. And it's so important, I believe, as a former Republican that you have. Tell me why you did it. What moved you to make such a dramatic step?
Well, thanks, Joe. I'll give you two recent examples, although there are many. One, I knew I wasn't going to vote for Donald Trump, in addition to the intellectual diminishing and covered with the previous speaker and your show. It was pretty obvious that he's just not a good person. So I had made that decision, but actually voting for the Harris-Walz and maybe doing it with some enthusiasm is a fairly recent development. I'll give you two recent examples, both of which I'm very familiar with. One is the natural disasters. That's always been a bipartisan issue. Both Democrats and Republicans have worked together to assist the people in harm's way. Well, the White House asked Congress to pass a supplemental bill to really help people with these disasters because we may be running out of cash. All of a sudden, the trolling, the Trump operatives, and everybody else started saying, well, they're giving that money to illegal immigrants. Not true. There are various parts of FEMA that are funded separately, and natural disasters is one of them. Well, when Andrew hit Florida, which has been one of many, I worked hand in hand with the George H.W. Bush administration and the Democrat Governor Lon Childs. It was always a bipartisan spirit. Everybody wanted to help those in harm's way. Well, you take it now, the Trump operatives are already lying about FEMA not having resources, about FEMA not going over. When the White House asked the Congress to meet for a supplemental bill, to pass a supplemental bill for FEMA, they said, call us after November 5th. That's something that just not have a precedent. The second one was with immigration. It was so hard to get a bipartisan bill put together in order to stop the intrusions at the border. But oh no, Trump had to tell the Republicans not to pass it because it was not in his best interest. So we have a bad, porous border now. So, there's nothing that comes up that's important to our citizens that Trump doesn't weigh in terms of his own interest. I just can't vote or support someone like that. And I think that Harris and Walz may not necessarily be my ideal ticket, but they're not going to put America in harm's way. And so I made an easy decision for me, and there are many others. And incidentally, Mika, I'm sorry that your dad's not around. Our country could really use him at this time.
I think about that all the time, especially on the world stage right now. It is really great to have you on the show and to have you as an example of choosing country over party, like Liz Cheney did. I think for some very high-level Republicans, formers, presents, in terms of service, it might be a difficult decision, maybe even deeply personal. It may be complicated. Are there some Republicans that are very well known that you wish would step up and make the choice publicly, country over party?
Sure. My good friend, Mitt Romney, who's a moderate, by and large, but well liked. Our Republican presidential nominee would be one. A lot of the leadership in the House and Senate, I know, feel the same way I do. Many who've retired have retired because they could not work with a, Trump administration or with Trump supporters. This whole idea about, embracing, these platitudes that we now have with Trump, it's a world of hate. In America, we've always found opportunities to have bipartisan unity whenever it's crucial for the country. That will not exist if Donald Trump gets elected. We're going to run into a period of time of great risk for America globally and a lot of challenges domestically. And I don't think that our country can survive 4 years of Donald Trump being oblivious to the Constitution, being oblivious to the rule of law, being oblivious to the importance of our institutions. And so, I'm very confident with my vote, and I think it's a vote to preserve American values.
It is so. It's the antithesis of Reagan, the personal hatred that is spewed. And I'm with John Kasich, who, John said, I don't hate Donald Trump. I just, his policies are bad for America, and that's why he said he couldn't vote for Donald Trump. I want to read this. I've been reading some conservative things that conservatives used to always believe, and this applies to you, I think, today. The conservative mind, always on my desk in Congress. Russell Kirk, both the impulse to improve and the impulse to conserve are necessary. Whether we join our energies to the party of progress or the party of permanence must depend on the circumstances of the time. And I think about the circumstance when David French and others like you make this bold decision based on the circumstances of the time. I ask you to explain this for Americans who may not understand, for Republicans that may not understand. You are looking through the lens of a man whose family fled a dictatorship. Talk about the circumstances of these times and your fears.
Well, Joe, when we joined the Reagan Revolution, excuse me, it was based on policy. It was based on the fact that we believe in conservative policies. And so, we had a revolution, we had a change, but it was based on policy. Now, this cult, the Trump cult, is not based on policy. It's based on fear-mongering. It's based on appealing toward lower interest. It's based on diminishing the importance of what made our nation great, respect for our laws, respect for others. And you can't join a bandwagon that's based on separating our country, on instilling fear and hatred on the backs of Americans. It's not healthy. It hasn't happened in a long time. And it's very difficult and cancerous for our country's survival. I frankly, given every other choice, I will say the number one choice is preserving our Constitution, preserving the rule of law, preserving the respect for institutions, and frankly, our love and compassion for one another. We're not enemies. We're all part of one America, and that's why I am so disgusted. Yeah.
One America, and he's so right. And it reminds me of, again, something I read over the weekend when he said Ronald Reagan was about ideas. Yeah. Ronald Reagan told Peggy Noonan in 1993, she asked him about his legacy, and he said this, the opposite of Donald Trump, who talks about how great he is every day. I've never thought of myself as a great man, just a man committed to great ideas.
Exactly.
Ronald Reagan.
And to get back to that, that's the argument, I think, for pushing away from Trump, is that if Trump loses, perhaps the Republican Party finally has a chance to rebuild in that type of
being committed to ideas and not being committed to a personality culture.
One of the most important conservative voices in the Florida Republican Party, Al Cardenas. Thank you so much for coming on Morning Joe. We really appreciate it.